You showed up early. You trained harder. You played by the rules, followed the procedures, said the right words, backed the right people. You moved the economy. You balanced the budget. You built the infrastructure. And you even calmed the streets. But at the end of the game, your country still got eliminated. This is the story of what it feels like when you do everything right and still lose the war.
You remember the first time you saw your country listed on the world map, not because it was big or powerful, but because it was yours. You weren't born to a throne. You weren't handed an empire. You were just someone who believed that if you studied hard, spoke clearly, and stayed honest, you could help your nation level up. At first, it felt possible. You joined debates, you learned policy, you worked internships, you followed the rules, and you climbed the ladder, step by step, office by office, title after title. And then, one day, you were in the room where the decisions were made. You thought, finally, I can fix this.
You arrived ready. Foreign policy? You read the treaties. Domestic economy? You crunched the numbers. Social issues? You listened to experts, protesters, parents, and teachers. You launched programs instead of slogans. You avoided empty promises because you knew they'd backfire later. You tightened anti-corruption laws. You raised taxes slightly on those who could afford it and invested in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. You didn't fight for clicks. You built systems. For a while, the numbers improved. GDP grew. Inflation slowed. Roads got better. And for a moment, you thought, maybe we're actually turning this around. That's when the first warning came. Not as a speech, not as a law, but as a cold email asking if you'd reconsider a project, and as a sudden hostile article in a paper that usually supported you. You kept acting like this was normal. We live in a democracy, you told yourself. Debate is healthy. Transparency is good. Let's just explain the policy better. But the attacks didn't stop. They turned your reforms into jokes. They turned your data into elitist lies. They turned your efforts into foreign influence. And then came the people who said, you're too slow. You're too boring. You're too reasonable. They promised simple solutions. Cut the taxes. Blame the neighbor country. Scream louder than the facts. And slowly, your country started to look their way instead of yours. You sat in your office, staring at the same charts. The country was improving. The numbers were real. Your team was working late. But the TV, the social media, the streets, they told a different story. A narrative that didn't care about your graphs. They didn't attack your policies. They attacked you. He's arrogant. She's fake. They're all the same. They didn't debate your ideas. They mocked your accent. They reshaped your past. They turned your integrity into weakness. You didn't lie. You didn't steal. You didn't cheat. But dishonesty spread faster than honesty. And your country started believing the story that felt good, not the one that was true. Election day came. You watched the polls with your team. Your numbers were fine. Your campaign was clean. Your promises were modest and realistic. They, on the other side, ran on outrage, fear, and broken promises. But their slogan was simple, and their enemies were loud. When the votes came in, something broke. Your country, the same people you had worked for, your own neighbors, your friends, your classmates, they chose chaos over calm. They chose the illusion of strength over the slow work of stability. On stage, you conceded gracefully because you believed that a peaceful transfer was more important than your ego. You said kind words, You praised democracy. But inside, you asked the same question over and over. If I did everything right, how did I still lose?
After the election, you left the building. Your office was now someone else's. Your name was no longer in every headline. For the first time in years, you watched the country like a citizen again. You saw the new leader make speeches full of drama, but few details. You saw them cut the programs you had built, not because they were bad, but because they reminded people of you. You watched public debt rise again. You watched protests grow. You watched schools, hospitals, and courts lose funding. And you felt something terrible, a mix of sadness, anger, and guilt. Not because you had failed to do your job, but because you had done your job perfectly, and it still hadn't been enough.
That's when the truth started to sink in. Politics isn't a math test. Governance isn't a logic puzzle. A country isn't eliminated because it lacks good people. It's eliminated because it forgets what good people actually do. You did everything right. You followed the rules, you stayed honest, you prepared well, you tried to listen. But the game was never designed to reward good players. It rewards visible players. It rewards loud players. It rewards players who treat the country like a brand, not a home. And for a while, your country looked away. It chose the shiny over the stable. It chose the shortcut over the climb. That's when you understood. You can be right and still be erased. Not because you weren't good enough, but because reality isn't always the strongest voice in the room.
Time passed. The glow of the new leader faded. The promises unraveled. The numbers started to tell the same story you had tried to warn them about. People began to ask, where did he go? Why did we let him leave? You didn't take satisfaction in that. You just felt tired. But you also realized something important. The fact that your country got eliminated once doesn't mean it's finished forever. Sometimes losing teaches more than winning ever could. Maybe next time, people will remember that calm can be courage, that preparation matters more than drama, that building is harder and more important than destroying. So you didn't walk away for good. You stepped back, but not off the field. Because the game of your country is still ongoing. And if you keep doing the right thing, maybe the next time they choose the person who did everything right, they won't eliminate them. Maybe they'll finally let them win.